Hey friends, Greg Kappas with GGN on Leadership Lifter series. The particular series, this is number 3 on what are the marks of a godly or ungodly, godless ministry culture. I'm going to deal more today with the godless side, dealing with fear. Not godly fear, the fear of the Lord that we see in Scripture, which is essential, and that's a godly thing, but ungodly fear, fear of controlling leaders. Have a concern as a pastor and a pastor to pastors and leading for Jesus in our culture and multiple cultures of leaders abusing the pulpit and just abusing things out of fear, improper fear. Let me read to you out of a guy who was a real jerk in Scripture that the Apostle John addresses. Yeah, he was a jerk. His name was Diotrephes, and 3 John verses 9 and 10 say, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Proud, arrogant, likes to be first, preeminent. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words. And not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren. So he avoids the brethren, has improper words, false doctrine, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. That's a jerk. That's a person who leads with wrong fear. You know, sometimes leaders arise who are just simply jerks. Unqualified, arrogant, insecure people who somehow lead other insecure people who don't recognize the motive of fear. They influence with fear, and they influence, according to this text, not only with fear, but with evil. Let me read you a note out of the Nelson Study Bible that I just love on both of these verses. I wrote, in other words, the text is saying John had written an earlier letter that was either lost or possibly destroyed by the jerk Diotrephes, who was asserting his control over the church out of his own personal ambition. Just the opposite of what 1 Peter 5, 1-5 says. John had probably written against or asking Diotrephes' church to extend hospitality to the traveling missionaries the apostle had sent out in verse 10. And Diotrephes had refused to heed John's request. Can you imagine? Not listening to the apostle John. Not a good thing. Not a good thing even today. If I come refers or reflects the idea of when I come. John intends to come and take Diotrephes to task. Man, that would have been a scene. For his attitudes and actions, and exercise his apostolic authority in punishing him. That's right, punishing him. This is a warning similar to those of Paul in 2 Corinthians 10:2 and 13:1 and 2. Diotrephes' sins include verbal attacks on John and his representatives, as well as active opposition to those who wanted to support legitimate matters. Do you see any leaders like that today? You know, Debbie and I, we were traveling across America for my doctorate on biblical leadership and the role of character and integrity in the pastoral epistles and drawing that to what leaders were living like today. We traveled throughout America and Israel doing research and interviews for my doctorate. We visited a church in a particular state that had been recommended to us. I had some doubts because I'd heard a few things for some godly leaders, but I thought, okay, another godly leader had recommended us going and interviewing and observing this gentleman. If we couldn't even interview him, at least observing his ministry. The senior pastor was a dominant leader. That can be good or bad, but he had his people's full attention with a very large church, but yet he led from fear. He led with intimidation, and he developed a culture within his church and his congregation of intimidation, fear. Later on, we learned he had lived a lie and was leading an immoral lifestyle. He was full of himself. Friends, follow godly leaders, but not leaders who try to control you or any of us with fear. This is Greg Kappas signing out with our third message on the marks of a godly, or in this case, godless ministry culture.